All right, real quickly, starting off with some of the features that you're going to have on your Armstrong Precision 4 to 16. First, you're going to take off these flip cap covers. Yes, it does come with flip cap covers, which is great. They're a little bit more durable than most that I would actually see at this price point, so I was happy to see that. Here is your ocular adjustment, and so you're going to move it to the left, and it does have a plus and a minus. It's non-locking, and that's okay, especially at the price point. But you're going to move that back and forth, and what this is going to do is make your reticle more clear or less clear, and that's the primary function of an eyepiece like this. So I had a friend once who was thinking that this was making the target more clear, and that is not necessarily the case. It is more directed at the reticle itself. So just keep that in mind, that that's for your reticle adjustment. The way that you can adjust that is by taking a quick peek at a blank wall or a blue sky. That's my favorite personally, is a blue sky, and just peek at it and make little adjustments at a time. Move it back and forth until you find where it's crystal clear for your eye and a nice tight, bold image on the reticle. Moving on, here's your magnification ring. 4 to 16 is really not much of a throw. It very quickly escalates from 4 to 16. You know, I would almost suspect that 16 is over here. It just feels like it's not much of a throw at all. I suppose there's a benefit to that. So pretty quick, 4 to 16, and you are going to go from 4, 5, 6, then 9, 12, and 16. So your indicated numbers are pretty useful, and I would typically be shooting it right about there, right about 10 power. That's my personal preference. It does have this extended bit here. Let me zoom in a little better. It has this extended bit which helps you to move it back and forth, but quite frankly, the ring by itself is smooth enough. If this interferes with your bolt, or your bolt handle, rather, you have a knob that somehow protrudes too far, yeah, you could take this off and you would be doing just fine with it as it is. Okay, taking a look at the turrets. You can see that you have indicators for the half mil and then eventually up to a full mil. So it's going to go between halves. And it's nice to have a numerical indicator on there. Even though these are exposed turrets, these aren't the kind of turrets you would probably see with extreme precision, but I would call them generally reliable, especially in the last 10 years, guys. We've seen turrets, exposed turrets on optics, even at this price point. They've really come into their own, and they're much more reliable than optics, beyond 10 years ago that had exposed turrets. And I would say even the last 5 years, I've seen quite a jump in reliability of actual tracking and feel, as well as tactileness. So these are both audible to me and tactile, where I can feel them. Distinct clicks, slightly mushy. It's not going to be something I'm going to compare against an optic that is twice the price, but at the price point, they're at the very least, they're competitive at the price point. I'm happy to see that, and there's a nice texture on here which is uniform to the other dials and turrets as well. You have your zero setting feature here where you can twist off the top, okay? And if I twist that off, I'm just going to loosen it up for you. And let's say that that was me setting 0. That's where I wanted it at 50 yards on this Rimfire. I would loosen up the cap, lift it up, drop it back on 0, and it does appear to line up right on the witness line, which is nice. At this price point, you often don't get an optic to line up where the numbers and the clicks are right on the witness line. Usually there's an error there, but this seems to line up pretty well per tenth. And I'm not getting like a half tenth where I'm somehow in the middle. In fact, it's kind of hard to manufacture that. Definitely a little slop to the turrets in the sense that they just require a little and then they're kind of a little bit of a mush, but not nearly as bad as they used to be. Much more tactile than they used to be. Windage and elevation are going to be very, very similar in feel, probably the same. And as far as internal travel, I'm not sure how much internal travel it has. I don't plan on testing this wildly far, but it's certainly functional between when I throw a can on or take a can off, or if I'm shooting maybe just a little beyond 200 yards. I have plenty here between the reticle and the turrets to make that happen. Not to mention, let's move to this, the side parallax. So the side parallax feature here is very smooth. It's appropriately smooth. It's not sloppy. It's not loose. It's also not firm to the point where you have to really grip it and muscle it. And I hate side parallax turrets that are so firm that you have to muscle them just to move them over, because it tends to throw you off a little bit on lighter rifles. Heavier rifles, not so much, but this rifle isn't terribly heavy. And so it's nice to have a nice smooth and low force. It takes a small amount of effort to move that turret. Glassy smooth, not gritty, not grainy on the inside. And you do have some numerical indicators there. I found them to be relatively close to my eye. Your experience and your mileage may vary on that one. You're going to have numbers that indicate right up to 600, and then it's going to go to infinity, which is not uncommon. I find that to be pretty practical for the way that these kind of optics are configured, especially with this 30mm tube and how much internal travel you're going to have. I'm just saying I think it makes sense the way that they've configured your primary numbers and identifiers here. Like I said, it's within the ballpark for the witness line and the number value indicated. I like having 15 yards. A lot of optics will kind of go down to 25, and they figure that's the closest that they need to be. I appreciate optics that go down to 15 or 10 yards especially, and 15 is definitely going the right direction at this price point to have this many features that work well, and for the optic to be as clear as it is. So far, I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing for feature sets. Not let down at the price point. One last thing, it does come with a scope shade, and I don't need to tell you a whole lot about it other than it's a decent scope shade. It is long enough, it's not crazy long, and it's going to do the trick if you're getting some scope glare, barrel glare, or you're shooting into the sun. At any rate, I like it. Now let's actually talk about shooting it and what I'm going to see with the reticle. Okay, I think got it now. This is a new ammo, I believe, properly zeroed with the new ammo. Let's just test a few more. And the rifle seems to load that decently well. That's good. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it right there. And I'm going to take out this scope tool. Take a look at this right here. So this is the tool that it comes with. And you could put some line through it if you didn't want to lose it. And, I don't know, strap it to something or just keep it in your bag like I'm going to. Anyways, this is plastic. It's not going to mar up the surfaces. And it's got these little ridges on here, which are going to slip down into the scope top, and it's going to help me reset to the zero. It doesn't have a zero stop, but it does have a zero reset, which is nice. That's kind of my minimum for exposed turret optics. I got to have something like that, and this is nice just to throw in because I don't always have a coin on me, and so I can keep this in my bag and actually use it across a few platforms. What I'd like to do is just for a few minutes talk about the glass, the eye relief, and the reticle. Okay, so starting off with the reticle. This is a second focal plane, not a first focal plane optic. So when I move the magnification ring like this, my image is getting smaller or bigger or appearing closer or further, however you want to say that. But the reticle stadia, those holdovers, proportionality is not changing with the movement of the ring, which means that the reticle stays the same size the entire time. And there are some benefits to that. There are some drawbacks to that. It's just kind of what you prefer and what kind of style of shooting you're doing or what you're used to. I actually grew up in long range shooting optics that were, believe it or not, quarter minute on top with mil reticles. Man, and you do math in your head to make that work. It was just kind of silly a lot of times. And nowadays, having mil turrets with a mil reticle, even with a second focal plane, you can do a lot with that. As long as the reticle is calibrated properly, which I think this one is fine. I don't notice any significant issues right off the bat. Maybe there are, but I don't see anything significant right now. Proportionality of the stadia seems appropriate. When I did some corrections when I was zeroing for this new ammo, I actually didn't notice any issues. I measured what I thought it was in mils according to this reticle, and I made my adjustment, and it turned out to be accurate for both windage and elevation. Actually, it corrected to where it's supposed to go, and so I think I was reading the reticle properly. It was going where it should, and it was not hard to see because, again, it's a second focal plane. So whether I'm on 4 power, like right now, or if I go all the way up to 16 power, that reticle looks the same. That also means that when I zeroed this, which I zeroed it on 10 power, I'm probably going to be shooting this on 10 power all the time. I might go down a little bit when I'm hunting for field of view to increase field of view, and I might boost it up if I want to see what those target holes look like at 16 power. But most of the time, mid-range on just about any optic is going to be the most optimized for image quality, and then also just functionality between the reticle and the target and all that kind of thing. Even on a second focal plane, going max all the way to the top of your magnification, usually there are some drawbacks, and this optic is no different. I probably won't shoot it on 16 power often. Let me explain why. So moving it up to 16 power, looking at the edges, first of all, the eye box is going to get a little bit more touchy, and head placement is becoming much more noticeable than it was before. And so I just don't need that. 16 power for me is for shooting at extended distances with the optics I'm used to. And yeah, when I go back and forth here, I don't see reticle shift. I don't see the reticle bouncing around on me here. I don't have that error, which is great. I'm very glad to see it's fixed. It's appropriately, I don't know what the word is, calmated. The reticle is not bouncing around in the scope. It's not shifting left or right a little bit. But what you are going to have is a change in parallax. And it's a reasonable change that is needed. So let's say I'm at 12 power right now, and I adjust the parallax until the image looks very clean to me, and it's a great image. 12 power, that's a totally sufficient image here at a little past 80 yards. Yeah, it's decent. But if I go up to 16 power, now I'm slightly out of focus, and I'm going to need to touch that up. That is true of many kinds of optics. It's not just this one. I want to make that clear. But one thing about this is it's not as clear at 16 power. The image is not going to be as capable. The periphery and the edges is going to have some chromatic aberration. Not terrible. Man, optics like this are so superior to where they were years ago. If we were just to compare that from 5 years ago, this is actually a pretty decent piece of glass at the price point. But there's some noticeable CA there. A little distortion towards the bottom of the reticle that I'm seeing around the edges, but the center of the glass still looks pretty good. It's probably ground reasonably well. Going down to 12 power, field of view opens up a little bit more. Eye box is more comfortable by far. Yeah, I'm going to say 12 power, it's just much more comfortable. And in the kind of shooting sports that I do, that matters because I might actually shoot some stages on 10 or 12 power very often for NRL 22, and so I am moving around and shooting, or I might be standing and shooting, I might be slung and shooting, kneeling and shooting, and I might leave it on 10 or 12 power. And so field of view matters because on those NRL courses or NRL 22 courses, you might have a really wide set of targets. You might have to scan a long ways, and on 16 power, the field of view is just not going to be amazing. It's acceptable, but it's not amazing. And on 12 power, it just gives me that little bit more that I'm going to need to find and acquire targets. But also, I think contrast is just better on 12 power, and just backing down to 10, it's even better because the image just seems superior. Mess around with that parallax one more time. Let's talk about colors. Colors seem decent. On 10 power here, the CA is not as noticeable. It's a pretty bright day today. Lots of sun. And lots of sun cast on the target I'm looking at. I've got multiple colors down there. I've got blue, I've got white, I've got black, I've got gray, I've got brown, got some tan, plenty of green, yellow, orange. Okay, got a lot of colors to look at down there, and color representation to my eye actually looks relatively true here at 10 and 12 power. And when I do adjust this properly, let me go ahead and touch that up. Where'd it go? Right about there. When I actually adjust the parallax properly and check for parallax error, to my eye, even though this isn't a dot style reticle, it's it's a horizontal line and a vertical line running into each other. Reminds me of the old SWFA reticles. It's thick enough, but precise enough, and it doesn't appear to be moving. It appears that parallax has been fixed. Yep, looks good to me. It's not moving around. And I move that, and the reticle is destabilized, and so I'm going to go back and correct it. And the reticle is not bouncing on me. It looks like it corrects parallax error there. Looks good, but colors are true enough, and that helps me with contrast, helps things stand out a little bit. Light is definitely not bad. These 30 millimeter tubes with, it's a non 56 millimeter objective using non ED glass. We're not using fluorite glass in anything here. It's just, a pretty baseline glass. But it's certainly better than a lot of branded optics that you're going to get from, let's say, Cabela's at this price point. A lot of those, the glass is still pretty inferior. I think this is a touch better. Yeah, no, I know that. It's a touch better than a lot of those, and the reticle might be superior as well. Maybe a little better on the feature sets too. I don't need illumination, but I think if you added illumination to this package, I think you would decrease the quality of the glass. Something would get nixed in order to add that one feature, so I'm pretty content to not have illumination on this optic. One thing that would have been really nice to do in this review, I wish I could have, this receiver does not have a screwed in Picatinny rail. Most of them do, like almost all those 1022s do. This BCA doesn't, but the standard Picatinny rails that come with most Ruger 1022s or this one are just not sufficient for rail space. They're pretty short, and it usually lends to an eye relief issue. What I did for this is I have it in a chassis, and I have a long stock on it because I'm already a tall guy, so I do need an extended stock, and I need some distance here. Even Kid, who sent this out to the channel, thank you to Kid for sponsoring a few videos. They have an extended buffer piece on their updated models of this chassis because of that Ruger 1020 issue that really hasn't been addressed. But one thing that Armstrong Enterprises did is they have a screw-on extended Picatinny rail. I wish I showed it in this review. I'm going to have to do a different review with that piece, but it reaches out a few more this direction so you can get a proper eye relief on your 1022s and just drop that on. And he's got a pretty good price on his extended Picatinny rail as well. I'm not showing that here. I wish I could have. It's just not going to work with this particular rifle, so that'll be saved for a different rifle and a different review in the future. So far, eye relief has not been an issue. It's actually decent. I'm going to say it's decent. It must be about 3.5 inches to 4 inches. So I feel comfortable. And when I measured it myself, it looked like it was about 3.5 inches on 12 power. So comfortable. It does change when I get up to 16 power. It's a little more touchy. And going down to 4 power, field of view is going to open up great. The image is going to be brighter for sure. And sensitivity is minimal. I can be a little off to the sides of the scope, and as long as my parallax is corrected, looks good. You just have to remember, and this is a crucial point to remember with second focal plane optics, is the distance you zeroed at, with the ammo that you zeroed at, on the magnification you zeroed at. That is your zero. A lot of people don't understand that you can't just plug and play any random ammo and suddenly you have a zero for that. No, you zeroed for one ammo, one distance, technically one temperature, one barrel length. All those factors, when you zero, they matter. And on a second focal plane, the magnification that you set it at, that's where you're zeroed at. Remember that, because when you change, you're going to have a point of impact change. You'll be aiming at the same spot, but because the subtensions are not changing relative to the target, which is being increased or decreased for magnification, yep, you're going to have a change. And so a change of impact. Sometimes it's pretty minor. In my experience so far with this, I've had pretty minor impact change, but I'm only shooting at 80 yards right now. So the further I go out, the more that could be potentially the issue right there. But I just don't think I'll need to. I think I'll be shooting this on 12 power more often than not. The lines are thick enough. The Stadia And the holdover with those dots, yeah, they contrast really well. You're not going to have trouble seeing this against animals, game, or targets in my experience so far at reasonable distances. It's going to contrast nicely, and I think it's fully sufficient for most people's kind of shooting. Empty. So here's what I have. I have a target that's a little smaller. It's a steel target, a little smaller than the size of a rabbit here, 80 something yards. And I'm going to shoot a few rounds on 4 power, a few rounds on 6 power, a few rounds on 12 power, a few rounds on 16 power. And I just want to show you that the difference in point of impact is not so significant that I would completely miss my target. I'm still on steel at each distance. So here I go. Failure to feed, or maybe bad bullet. Okay, let's go to 12 power. As you can see there, if that was a rabbit or some practical game, raccoon, something like that, maybe coyote, at this distance, I'm still deadly and I'm effective, I'm on target, and my point of impact that I'm looking at for a pattern, it's still reasonable on that piece of steel. It's a cluster that's like this, and I'm really steady on the Sunway Photo tripod anyways, so I feel good about it. I just wanted people to know who shoot targets but maybe haven't really thought about why their point of impact is changing when they change magnification. Well, if you have a second focal plane, that's what's going on there, but no big deal. Lastly, if this isn't exactly what you were looking for, if this isn't your cup of tea, I want you to check out his website, because this isn't the only thing he has. He has other products on there. There's some cool things, and I suspect that there will be more upcoming with the popularity of 50-yard competitions and base class rifles, that sort of thing. This is something that's going to fit in really nicely with that, and I think a lot of people are almost kind of gravitating away from open class rifles and back towards base class rifles because they want to have fun and they don't want to spend $10,000, and this is going to help you stay in that budget very, very well. So well done to Armstrong Enterprises. I think this is going to make a lot of people happy, and it's another option that I can actually get behind, especially if you are into second focal plane optics.